Hey everybody, today I thought I would do a video about misanthropy. What led me to this was not a comment on my video or anything or an email, but rather a very short and not even remotely debate styled exchange that I had with someone regarding another video. It was a little back and forth, more or less on what constitutes misanthropy, and it got me to thinking about why it's something I detest so much. Uh, Out of all the aggravating pathological behaviors that I see on a regular basis, misanthropy probably annoys me the most. And I thought I would just discuss that. Let's talk about misanthropy. What really gets me about it, misanthropy, for anyone who doesn't know, is characterized by disdain, disgust, dislike uh, of humanity as a whole rule, as a general. It's not that you dislike a person, you dislike people, all of them. And the reason why this annoys me is, for starters, there's an inherent hypocrisy when a person says that they dislike people in general, because they are people in general. But even more so, what really disturbs me is how in modernity it's sort of seen as a virtue. It's such a peculiar thing. And one of the things I'm going to bring up is bigotry versus misanthropy, because it's staggering to me. And heads up, let me get this out of the way. This is not an apologia or a defense of bigotry. And later on, it's going to sound. I'm going to start saying some nice things about bigotry, but it's really against the backdrop of misanthropy, because it doesn't make sense to me. And one of the things that also has been brought up, I see it in media everywhere. I see it at Rick and Morty, Red Dead Redemption 2. You have this characteristic attack on bigotry, which I'm not completely adverse to. But then at the same time, the people who are doing this, their chief virtue, what they brag about, is being misanthropes. You see it especially with Red Dead Redemption 2. You got this guy, he's running around killing clan members, uh, but then he'll look right at the camera and say, I hate everybody. I don't like people in general. And then he goes and kills innocent people too at the same time. It's very, it doesn't make sense. This tendency to lump all of humanity into a negative category, and even and brag. I hear this pretty regularly, at least online. You don't hear people say it out loud as often, but I have a few times. Oh, I hate everybody equally. How is that a good thing? How is that a good thing? Uh, I mean, again, not defending the Ku Klux Klan or anything, but at least they like some people. They like white Protestant Southern men. And Hitler, he liked Germans and Hungarians and Austrians. Little known fact: Hitler was actually Austrian. It's a common misconception. In fact, there's like a little joke I heard about that on one occasion, where someone said the greatest tactic ever employed by Austria was to convince the world that Beethoven was Austrian and Hitler was German, and because it's the other way around. But yeah, I consistently hear people brag about misanthropy, and it doesn't make any sense to me, because if you hate a segment of society, a minority or a majority, you're regarded as a bigot, and that's a bad thing. And again, no argument there. I don't see an issue with that. But if you hate everybody, that's somehow something to be proud of. It doesn't make any sense. And I consistently also hear it against compared with animals. And that's another reason that sort of led me to this video. Is the previous one was about treating animals ethically, and you hear that a lot among people who tend to anthropomorphize animals. They will simultaneously raise animals to the status of a person, and draw all these comparisons, and then in the next breath they'll say, oh well, I don't like people. Apes are better than people. They're better parents. They're better souls. They're just better. Dogs are sweet and innocent, and people are bad, and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of attitude when you're a teenager or an adolescent, whatever you want to call it, because their empathy isn't as strong. They have the empathic power of a child, and the intellectual prowess of a burgeoning adult. And so it's a very confusing time, and teenagers tend to be misanthropic. That's fine. When I see a teenager say something edgy or misanthropic, people should be nuked, we should get rid of all of us and then the whales can flourish. It's fine because they're a teenager. But when I keep increasingly seeing it in adult segments of society, I keep seeing it promoted on media, this idea that you should hate everybody. Again, hating 7 billion people as a collective is somehow something to brag about, whereas hating a fraction of society is seen as the worst thing you can do. Oh, it's the worst. How could you be how could you be homophobic or Islamophobic or anti-Semitic or racist regarding skin and all that? But at the same time, if you hate everyone in Africa plus everyone else on the planet, that's okay. In fact, it's better than okay. It's a virtue to be misanthropic. It means you're an intellectual, and that's something I've really picked up on. Is it seems that a lot of people have misunderstood uh, misanthropy for intellectualism. And I see that a lot. I see people say things that are outright very cynical, and I mean that in the modern sense of the word, which that alone, I'm not even going to get into that, but that kills me that the word cynical means you just have a general negative view of things. It really, Diogenes is one of my favorite philosophers, and it pisses me off to no end to see his outlook on the world be just boiled down to being a dick. I mean, that's really how it's been sort of construed. And you see that with actually every philosophy. Stoics just don't show emotion. Well, that's not at all what really Stoicism is about. You see that with everything. Nihilists don't believe in anything. Well, that's not what Nietzsche was saying at all. Um, but misanthropes in particular, it's this very generic outlook characterized by just not liking people when you are people. That's inherently hypocritical. And what I think it boils down to, or at least what I'm personally observed, is two kinds of misanthropes. They're the kind that associate misanthropy and cynicism, again, modern use of the word, with being smart. It's the kind of person who, if politics gets brought up, they just say things like, well, they're all liars, they're all bad people. Okay, sure, but you're not really adding anything to the discussion. You're not really, it doesn't sound like you follow politics, but you want to look smart. And the same thing goes with misanthropy. People who say people in general are bad, or they don't like people, or animals are better than people, or any of those kinds of things. We're a cancer and we should never go to other planets because that would be like a virus spreading, that kind of attitude. It's either adolescent or it's someone trying to appear intellectual. And then the third possible avenue for a person to take to be misanthropic, or at least appear misanthropic, to say misanthropic things, is that they have no self-worth at all. They don't value themselves at all. And so instead of dealing with that, they project all that self-loathing outward to the rest of society. I don't like me, and I'm a people, therefore I don't like people. And none of these outlooks are healthy. It's the only point of view that cannot be justified. It's the only one. Like, I can talk to somebody who hates a segment of society because chances are there's some rational reason why they came to that conclusion. I can talk to somebody who is a hardcore vegan who thinks that, we need to depopulate humanity because they eat too much meat or whatever. I can talk to somebody like that. I can talk to religious fanatics. I can talk to hardline atheists. I can talk to just about any political, social, philosophical segment of society because they have some rational basis. But misanthropy, I see it promoted constantly on television as, the cool, edgy character, the protagonist who's a free thinker. Well, he hates people. Why? There's never a justified reason for it. And you see it especially with this, the outsider person genre. That's not a very good term for it, but you see this with Avatar and Pocahontas and Mutiny on the Bounty. You have these cases where someone who belongs to what's regarded as mainstream, whether it's the British Empire or the modern West or Earth in the case of Avatar, and they go to another culture and they're inherently better because they have just a better value system. But people, and then they're greedy. People are just motivated by all these vices and all these bad behaviors, and then ultimately the hero betrays their culture or their nation or their species or their planet in favor of this superior bunch. And you see that a lot in film. And it's actually kind of a wonderful genre because it explores the bad things that people do and people have ingrained in them. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But then it causes us to idealize something that doesn't exist. It causes us to sort of revere these hypothetical cultures and peoples that they're not real. Pocahontas didn't really paint with all the colors of the wind. The blue people in Avatar, they're not real. And that's what I want to ask every misanthrope whenever they say things like that. Like, people are just bad, people are scum. Compared to what? Seriously, who are you comparing people to? Because many animals, they eat their own young. They behave inherently as a bundle of instincts. Again, love animals, but that's how they behave for the most part. People are the only creatures that can actually contemplate the welfare of the things that they do, or rather the animals that they kill. Crocodiles don't actually cry for the things that they kill. And I'm not saying that people are great because they are able to contemplate that. I'm just saying, who are you comparing us to give us such a harsh judgment? The only possibility is you're comparing us to animals and you're projecting your best traits onto these animals, which is, again, anthropomorphization, and that's not healthy and it's not correct. Or you're comparing us to these ideals, to gods and monsters and aliens and fictional things that human writers and imaginers have created in order to compare us to. Which is, it's great to create these ideals because it gives you something to strive to be like. Just as it's great to idolize certain people for the things they've done and want to be like them. But when you put them on such a pedestal, and we do this too, I've noticed that too. Misanthropes love to talk about Tesla and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and well, in some cases Jesus, although that's sort of less popular now. They talk about them like they're these unreachable peaks, and they sort of separate them from humanity so they can be misanthropic. They can say, well, I don't like people, but I like this person because they're not really a person. They're a hero. They're unattainable. Well, that's also bad because that means you can't ever reach any kind of peak like them. And it's doubly amusing because now people are talking about those people for bad things. Case in point, Gandhi. Gandhi was definitely, by modern standards, a bigot. He did not like sub-Saharan Africans. He wasn't too fond of Europeans either. He was all about Indians, which I have no personal problem with, and I think is, again, better than being a full-blown misanthrope. I mean, again, it's the difference between hating some people and hating everybody. I don't think you should hate in general, but I mean, if you're gonna hate, why not focus it down on a smaller segment of people rather than everybody? Uh, yeah, it's like I said, the only unjustifiable uh, point of view that I can think of. There's literally no reason to be a misanthrope. And if you are, and you see this a lot with the edgy comments online. People say, well, if you hate people, why don't you start with yourself, and implying that you should commit suicide. Well, while I think that's a really drastic thing to say, there's some level of truth to it. If you don't like people so much, why don't you strive to be better than your imaginary perception of people? Because it is imaginary. I mean, that's the thing. You never see a misanthrope at a soup kitchen. You never see a misanthrope making pancakes for homeless people. Because, again, it either stems from self-loathing. As such, someone who hates themselves, they're going to struggle to do good things for other people because they see their worst traits in others, or because they want to look intelligent and they're not actually empathic or sympathetic to other people at all, and so they're just trying to stroke their own ego by saying, well, I hate people. I'm like Rick, I'm Pickle Rick. It's nonsense. It's purely based on naivety and arrogance. I mean, really, there's no reason to be misanthropic. If you're gonna hate somebody, at least hate somebody and not people as a whole. Yeah, that's about it. Shorter video than yesterday, thankfully, because that one took forever to upload. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Misanthropy is immature. it is egotistical, and it's the only perspective I can think of where there's no real decent argument for it. That's one thing. I'll defend just about anybody to some degree. I'll see the good in some group, but misanthropes, there's nothing good about it. So yeah, that's it. See ya.